So here's the time lapse for the parts that I'm going to assemble today. Well, some of the parts that I'm going to assemble today. Some of these we've already talked about. This is going to be the grip and the trigger mechanism, along with the fire select for the Sterling SMG Mark IV or the Star Wars A New Hope E11 Stormtrooper blaster. So here you can see the trigger guards being printed along with an actual trigger. I believe that's a magazine well in the back. A couple of pins. And the one at a funky angle in the middle in the back is the fire select switch. And this is a large big print, and I believe this is where I ran out of filament of one color and had to switch midway. So some of these parts we won't get to for a while. The one on the far left is the scope we talked about in the last video. There's a grip in the back and a couple of other parts that we've seen here and there. Several of the scope parts. And there's the charge handle in the front. This slight curvature, which is intentional. Just some fun stuff to watch. And then we'll talk about putting it all together. Hey, so this is the part 2 of the build for the E11 Stormtrooper blaster from A New Hope. This is one of the neatest parts. I've actually disassembled the one that I had put together so I can show you, and then I've got another set of parts that I haven't pulled all of the supports off of yet. So I want to kind of talk you through and show you how this goes together. It's very much like a real firearm in the way that the pieces go together. And it's beautifully designed and make use of BBs. The instructions actually say what size ball bearing is, and some more of those pin springs, ballpoint pen, ink pen springs that I ordered a box of those for a previous project. So let me show you what I've got here. So as I mentioned, this is the trigger assembly and the handle, the grip printed out very, very nice, particularly on the top side. I've got some anomalies here, and I'm not really sure what happened there. On this other one, it printed just fine. This one still has the supports. This one I've removed the supports. You can also see this was in that same batch where I ran out of the gray and it picked up with the white. I've got some work to do on the bottom side texture bit, either with a file or sandpaper or maybe just a hacksaw blade. There are a couple of areas with some ugly supports. You can see right there. I haven't removed this one to see how bad they look, but the overall print looks really nice. This one's got a little bit of a ridge from where the second filament roll picked up, but even on this one you've still got that same ridge. Coincidentally, it happens to be right about there, so it looks like that's part of the model, or the way that the slicing software interpreted the model, and that can be easily sanded off, and it's just right there. So we've got a couple of frame pieces, lots of little alignment holes on both sides, and they're different, and then also on the front and then on the top. I printed this side down. You can see the texture. We've got a trigger guard. We've got a couple of pins. This one's actually indexed. It's got a flat side, which comes in handy. This is a plastic pin, which is really cool. This is a little retaining clip. This mechanism makes use of one of those BBs or ball bearings and is used for the selective firing switch. Now I'm going to try to remember how all this stuff goes together. I've got this one here that I did not take apart, which is only partially put together, and you can see with the different colors how this kind of sort of aligned. One of the last things I'll put on is the trigger guard. So let's see, we've got the trigger mechanism, which has a pin. So let me redo that. So we've got the trigger, slides in, we've got a pin that holds it in place, and it's press fit. It can be glued on the exterior, and you've got a little bit of range in the motion of the trigger, again, because boys like to play with guns. On the interior of this, it's really, really fun. So there's three pieces that all go together. There is the, no, that's not the select fire, it's up here. There is the selector switch, which is beautifully textured. And you can see it's got a retaining ring. There is this little mechanism that holds the ball bearing. It looks like there's some support material that could come out of there, but I'm just going to leave it. And then there's this retaining clip. And all of that goes in that hole right there. So one of the first pieces is this mechanism. Looks like a little figure eight. Kind of reminds me of a figure eight. And it fits down into a groove on the bottom side and aligns with these three holes. So the ball bearing, or the BB, is going to fit into these three holes. And there's enough flexure in this little arm that the ball bearing, or the BB, rolls from slot to slot to slot for the fire indicator if this were the Sterling SMG. And I will fiddle with this a little bit. Funny thing about ball bearings is they roll around. I can't show you and do it at the same time, which makes this a very useful video. Oh, now it wants to stay in there. Be in here. Okay, I'll try that again. Put the BB in there. So the larger part of the figure eight goes into a groove in the bottom. There, and it's snapped in. So you can see that that's in there. You can see the BB shining through the hole right there, and it's in place. This is the retaining ring for the selector switch. So the selector switch goes in, and I believe, yeah, there's a groove right here. I don't know if it's going to focus. There's a groove right here which aligns with tiny little nubbin right there. So when they go together, let's see, it should orient like this, so that the selector switch is just off a little bit. In like that. Oh, and there's a good click. So on the other side of the selector switch, I should have showed you, there's a little groove that this retaining clip clips into, and it's right down there. So the retaining clip will go in like this, click, and now you've got the select fire if it were the Sterling SMG Mark IV. Oh, let's see. Oh, I put the trigger in prematurely. So, because there's a spring in here. Wahaha. So, looking down the front, there's a little hole right there that comes out the backside right there. And it is the size of dun, 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 spring. And there's a little garbage in there, so I actually kind of twisted this one in there. But also, it uses the BB, come on fingers, there. It uses the BB at the end against the trigger right here, so that the ball bearing does what a ball bearing is supposed to do. It rolls back and forth, and the spring just puts pressure evenly because of the shape of the spring onto the ball bearing, and then another ball bearing or BB goes in at the end once we get it loaded into the frame, which is right here. And I think oh, this is good. Okay, so there's a couple of neat tricks. Sorry, I've got extra pieces laid out here for demonstration. This spring clip goes here. I think it's pretty much the same, but one piece goes over the top. One piece goes over the top here. The other goes over this piece right here, and the flat surface of this aligns with this pin, which holds everything in place with the grip. Like I said, absolutely beautiful. So let's see if I can get this in here. There, I'll do it like that. Now you can see the indicator switch. I think it's automatic repeating and semi-automatic. So fully auto, 3 burst, and then single fire, something like that. It would be in German and not English anyway. And the spring, like I mentioned, up here at the front gets another BB just to keep the spring in place. So I'll put that in just a second. And then we have to put the spring in the back. This will kind of hold everything in place, like I said. So I'll put the spring in here. So the spring is this funky C shape, and it goes between 2 posts. So the first one goes in without any problem right there at the top, and then swings around to the bottom, and then we just have to spread it apart and up and over. That's a boost right there. And again, because it's plastic, how do I do this? How did I do this before? Some of this could be cleaned up, and again, I get to take all this apart when I paint it. And I did pick up paint. Yay. I remembered. And then over the top. Yay! And it clicked. Alright. Now, I can put the trigger assembly back in here, like this. I'm going to go ahead and put the one ball bearing is there. I'll put the spring in. And I did clean up that hole, but there was some support material in there. So you can just give it a twist. And then a BB goes in at the end. It's going to go shooting across. There we go. Oh, okay. So with a little finagling, you can see the BB there. And with this snugly in place, it just keeps the spring at bay. You can see the other BB right here. You didn't get to see any of that. I essentially just push the spring down in there, put the BB back in place, and just push the spring down a little bit better so it's seated better. And so this, now gets the grip. You can see that it is dimensional and it aligns this hole right here. And this pin has that registration mark that goes against that spring, which click right there. So everything is now firmly in place. And then the trigger guard goes on. The flat part goes in this little groove. And it goes in very, very snug. And then the top part comes in. Oh, oops. Like I said, very, very snug. There goes the BB. I may never find that BB. My mother hated BBs. When we were kids, we could use them for all sorts of things. And I can lose about 1,496 more of those. But my mother hated BBs because we would lose them in the shag carpet, because it was the 70s, and they would end up in the vacuum cleaner and make a hellacious noise. Okay, so I rotated that out, since it does have a registration mark. And trying to remember the best way for this to go in before I put that BB back in there one more time. I'm going to go ahead and put the trigger guard on. It firmly snaps in there. Like I said, beautifully, beautifully done. I'll get one more BB back in place. I dropped it twice. Okay, now slide this together. And this pin, like I said, registers and it holds everything in place. And give it a turn, just like a real screw. That locked into place. With the screw being up and down, that's the, well, I've still got the supports on that, but that's the flat registration mark aligns with that. So now, this is all together. Got a little spring in the trigger, and we do have the fire selector with a little click with the action on the inside. You can see the retaining clip give way. It just puts a little, it's the retaining ring for this, but also puts a little back pressure on the little figure 8 with ball bearing in there. Really cool. I believe that's the whole thing. So that's what it looks like on this side. Obviously not this color. This texture is good. I may have to clean these grooves up. This texture is not bad. I've got a little cleaning up to do around the edges. The texture on this worked out really nice. This texture's nice. Maybe a little sanding around the edge. The texture in here, which is right here, I don't know if it was intentional or if the way that it printed out, but we've got these little grooves and a couple of little dimples, and it works out. I think it adds character to the whole thing. The trigger's printed out fairly well, nice, smooth. There are some ridges that, with a little bit of automotive primer filler and a little sanding, there's, you can see a tiny, right here on the back corner of the trigger, there's a little kick out that could be trimmed down, and a lot of this is preferential, again depending on the accuracy you're going for a make-believe laser gun from a space western, and or the replica for the Sterling SMG Mark IV. You can obviously go nuts with this. This is the first part of the major assembly. What I showed you the other day, this is the trigger mechanism. This is the other more complicated aspect. I'll get into stock, folding stock. Which is really what sets this apart for it to be a Star Wars blaster. I will do some time lapse on support removal, and we'll move on down the line.